I call the member for Maitland.
Thank you, Mr Temporary Speaker. I rise to speak on the Emergency Services Legislation Amendment Bill 2018. Broadly, this bill will make amendments to the State Emergency and Rescue Management Act of 1989, the Rural Fires Act of 1997, the Fire Brigades Act of 1989 and the State Emergency Services Act of 1989. We on this side of the House do not propose to oppose the bill, but there are a number of issues we would like to propose to amend, including amendments to employment protections for volunteers, which currently relate to emergency declarations made by the Premier. And this will be amended to any local emergency operation deemed necessary by the SES or RFS, which could have a tremendous flow-on effects for employers and businesses across New South Wales. As a member for Maitland, I was only in this job a matter of weeks before I had my first experience with a major natural disaster. The April 2015 superstorms and floods quickly revealed to me, as the new state representative, the calibre of professional and volunteer emergency services personnel that I represent. When the majority of our community was seeking refuge in their homes and ensuring their loved ones were safe, an army of the willing headed out to show that the worst of nature brings out the best in our emergency services personnel. And I'm particularly reminded, Mr Temporary Speaker, of the Thornton Rural Fire Service Brigade, who went out that evening very late and came back in the morning to find that all of their cars had been flooded, as well as their new station. The protection of workers' rights should be paramount in these amendments, for without these frontline volunteers, we have no state emergency service, no rural fire service or volunteer rescue association, for example. One thing that's starting to emerge from climate change is that storm and flood events are more intense and destructive, while bushfires can take days and in some cases weeks to extinguish. Aircraft may strengthen our capability to deal with these events, but ultimately it is boots on the ground which are just as vital to saving lives. Volunteers sign on because of a sense of community. It's government's job to acknowledge both that contribution and provide support for the businesses that make the sacrifice to free up staff for the greater good of the state. Ensuring legislation is fit for purpose should, however, only be part of the debate. Maitland is a microcosm of modern New South Wales. It's the fastest growing city outside of the Sydney area, and I see, as a local member, a rapidly expanding city which is located on a floodplain and struggling with its growth due to ever under-resourcing, especially by the state government. Flood is one of our challenges, but so too is fire, as thousands of Maitland residents will tell you. Over recent fire seasons, many suburbs have looked to the horizon around them to see plumes of thick smoke from bush and grass fires in the neighbouring Cessnock and Port Stephen local government areas, and of course there are house fires. Thankfully, our New South Wales Fire and Rescue and Rural Fire Service brigades have joined the fight to keep those blazes from our city's doorstep, but we can never become complacent. The vigilance to ensure fire and rescue and the RFS are adequately resourced and equipped so they can fulfil their role requires strong representation to advocate for them. To Maitland's firefighters and emergency services personnel of all of the different brigades, I say to them, I have your back, not only to ensure legislation is on your side, but so that you can have the tools to do the job that when they're needed. In my role as a member for Maitland, I've met with many of the local firefighters and spoken to them about issues. I've also had representations, and I'd like to take the opportunity when we're talking about these issues to put some of their voices into this debate. One of the local community members talked about the new Rutherford Fire Station and Lower Hunter Zone headquarters, which hasn't been opened with around-the-clock full-time staff. And I'll just quote from this letter. So Legislative Council member Scott Farlow said, "This new fire station and zone headquarters will provide a bigger and better base for the firefighters who work hard to protect the Talara, Rutherford, Aberglasslyn and broader Maitland communities." Now, someone in my community has said, this sounds fantastic, but the hard-working firefighters get better facilities, but what about the public? Why wasn't this upgraded to permanent staffing? Maitland is listed as the fastest growing regional city in New South Wales, so it makes sense that emergency services increase with the population. I believe that a fire truck that leaves in under a minute is far beneficial to the community than one that leaves in 10 minutes under the retained model. Studies show that 40 years ago, individuals had 17 minutes to escape a house fire. In 2018, it's now 3 minutes. Another local firefighter said Rutherford Fire Station is staffed by permanent firefighters during the hours of 8 to 4:30 Monday to Thursday and 8 to 4 on Fridays. Outside of these hours, the station is staffed by retained firefighters who are notified of incidents via pager telephone, who then have to drive to the station, wait until 4 members arrive and then respond to incidents. No 24-hour permanently manned fire station to the west of East Maitland within the Hunter Valley exists, with the next closest permanently manned fire station to the west being located at Tamworth. A local business owner and resident has expressed his concerns on this matter to me, saying, "I'm a resident and business owner within the Maitland area and have recently noticed and also brought to the attention of other major stakeholders within the Maitland area the inadequacies of the New South Wales Fire Rescue Service. With the new shopping centre at Green Hills, new schools, new hospital under construction, new retirement villages and the new developments, there is only one permanent 24-hour station at Rutherford, which is only manned Mondays to Fridays 8 till 4 and therefore retained on call outside of these hours. There are also other retained stations on call at Morpeth and Maitland. These retained stations have an average turnout time of more than 10 minutes, whereas a permanent station is only a few minutes." I've also had many representations, Mr Temporary Speaker, about ageing equipment for all our services, and that is something that's a big concern, and so I think that this is something that I'd like the government to turn their attention to. But I'd also like to take this opportunity to talk about concerns that I have had raised with me, particularly from members of the SES, in the environment that we are in these days. And I think there are some really big challenges for the SES, particularly. In my electorate, I know these would extend to other areas where major bushfires occur. And that is that as a community, we no longer live and work so close to our homes. And in the modern day life of work and education and needing to access services for health, etc., we're finding that when natural disasters strike, people tend to become more resistant than I think they were in past times to following the orders of the SES and other emergency services. We also have people in the community who are less mobile and less able to leave their homes, and a lot more pet ownership, etc. So these are all challenges for our emergency service workers, and I just want to place on the record my admiration for them and for the work that they do in negotiating those difficulties. I know in Maitland, where we've had up to 2,000 people cut off from any shops, any work, any education, the SES have borne the brunt of the frustration of community members who in our modern day have to live and work in quite different locations, and I really want to support them in that. So anyway, thank you, Mr Temporary Speaker. I urge the House to support the bill. Thank you.
The question is